afternoon. My name is Minnie Mouse, and we are going to be reading Whale Song, Chapter 14 together. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to read like that. But I am going to stay in this outfit because it looks fresh. Chapter 14. My mother passed away peacefully on November 29th, 1979, less than 4 weeks from Christmas. But it was the way that she died that permanently altered my life. Nona Rocco and Nona Sophia had gone for a walk outside, leaving my father and me to visit with my mother. When Dr. Michaels arrived, my father asked her to step into the hall. Overwhelmed by curiosity, I pressed my ear against the door. "We have to leave her on life support," I heard Dr. Michaels say. "I know that's not what she wanted, but as long as there's brain activity, it's my obligation to keep her alive. I hope you understand that. You can go to the courthouse and file a petition to have her removed, but that could take months," my father argued. "Years." He grew more insistent and I heard Dr. Michaels ask him to lower his voice. Their indistinct whispers frustrated me. Then I heard them moving closer, and I backed away from the door. When they entered the room, my father looked very upset. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson," Dr. Michaels said, checking the monitors, "but I have no other choice." She left the room. My father heaved a sigh of frustration. The respirator that breathed for my mother imitated him. Puff, puff. "Dad?" I said, shifting in the chair. I overheard you talking to Mom the other night." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What about?" "I know what she asked you to do." I saw his face crumble before me, shocked. His head dropped into his hands, and a shudder moved up his spine. Slowly, he raised his eyes and studied my mother's immobile body as the machines pumped life into her. "Sarah," he sighed, shaking his head sluggishly. I remembered my mother's words to him. "Sometimes you have to do what's wrong to make things right. I can't bear for you or Sarah to see me lying there like a vegetable." I glared at him, angry and betrayed. Time stood still, frozen. Fear held us captive. We were caught in an emotional tug-of-war. My father battled with his conscience while I fought to convince him to set her free. This is where my world collides, where my memory ends. I vaguely recall the sound of a door slamming. I must have left the room. The next thing I remember is seeing my father by my mother's bed, holding her hand. In the other, he firmly gripped the unplugged end of the respirator. The monitors were silent, their buttons turned off. "Sarah!" he shouted in a hoarse voice, his blue eyes piercing me where I stood. Uttering a cry of horror, I raced from the hospital room and ran down the hallway. I twisted down one corridor and turned down the next until I was lost. I had no idea where I was going. I just needed to escape. "Run, Sarah!" I collided into a familiar body. "Hi, Nayu, what's wrong?" I looked into Nana's eyes, silently pleading for help. Then a merciful darkness encompassed me, and I felt myself plunging into its shadowy embrace. "Take me away." "Sarah!" I heard my mother whispering to me and felt her lips caress my forehead. I smiled, then I cautiously opened my eyes. There was no sign of her. The room I was in wasn't familiar either. I looked around and realized that I was in the hospital, lying in one of the beds. That confused me. I wasn't the one who was sick. Nana sat in a nearby chair. "Hi, Nayu?" Her gaze was intense, and she frowned when she touched my forehead. "You're too warm." "Nana, what happened? Why am I here?" She muttered something under her breath. "Do you not remember, child?" I shook my head. "Your mother has gone to the Great Spirit. She's on her way home." I shook my head in denial and clamped my eyes shut, but the truth hit me with the finality of a door slamming shut. My mother was dead. "What happened in her room?" Nana rasped. I shook my head, confused. "What do you mean?" "Did your father—" She broke off as footsteps approached. The door opened abruptly, and my grandparents rushed into the room, their faces fearful and pale. "Sarah!" Nona Sophia cried. "Are you okay?" Nana stood slowly, nodding to my grandparents, and slipped from the room. Nona Rocco moved closer to my bed. His beard was thick and white, and it looked as if he had slept in his clothes. "What happened?" he asked me. I don't know. I recalled being in my mother's hospital room, and then nothing until I woke up. Nona Sophia shook her head sadly. "We just want to know why your father did what he did. We know it had to have been an accident, even though the police are questioning him." "The police?" I stammered. "What do you mean? What did he do?" My grandparents exchanged anxious looks. I tried to force myself to remember, but everything was so hazy. The only thing I understood with absolute certainty was that my mother was gone. I would never see or talk to her again. "I want my dad," I wailed. Nona Rocco enveloped me in his arms, and I smelled the comforting scent of his cologne. "Your papa," he said slowly, "he cannot come here now. He has to explain what happened." "I'm sure he'll be here later," Nona Sophia added. My grandfather shot her a warning look. Well, he will, she said, crossing her arms defiantly. I slept for the remainder of the afternoon. At some point during the day, my subconscious collected and stored precious tidbits of information. My grandparents and Nana must have been talking while I slept. They're calling it a suicide. The police, murder. Jack might go to prison. My father had been found beside my mother, holding her lifeless hands in his. He had disobeyed the doctor's order and had shut down all the monitors and shoved them against the wall. When the alarms rang, a crash cart was pushed into the room, and attempts were made to revive my mother, but they were too late to save her. Dr. Michaels had no choice but to call security and have my father quarantined. When the police arrived, they escorted him out of the hospital and questioned him relentlessly for over an hour. They even searched him, Noriko said as I drifted in and out of sleep. The police wouldn't let anyone into Daniela's room after they pronounced her dead, not even the doctors. They're taking her to the coroner's office. My bella figlia. Through a haze of half-sleep, I heard Nona Sophia. Rocco, our beautiful Karina is gone to the angels. What has Jack done? Her keening wail broke my heart. Merciful sleep rescued me from hearing anything more. Dr. Michaels came to see me after supper. You have hysterical amnesia, Sarah, she said. It's common after a traumatic event like this, but luckily it's only partial amnesia. She was right about that. I remembered everything before she left my mother's room, and everything since waking up in the hospital, but I was missing a section of time in between. Dr. Michaels told my grandparents and Nana that I had to remain in the hospital overnight and that she would locate someone near Bamfield to help me regain my memory. Sarah's memory will return, Nana said, nodding. It'll return on its own when she is good and ready to remember. The following afternoon, an attendant wheeled me down the hall in a squeaky wheelchair. He pushed me to an awaiting taxi where my grandparents and Nana were exchanging a few words. I'm going home now, Nana said, kissing me goodbye. My grandparents and I took the taxi to a motel. We have to go to the police station tomorrow morning, my grandfather said as he tucked me into bed. I was surprised and a bit scared. Why? They want to talk to you, ask you a few questions. I'm tired, I mumbled, not wanting to think about it. Snuggling into the crisp sheets, I fell into an exhausted sleep while my grandparents hovered over me, muttering in Italian. The Victoria Police Department buzzed with activity and everything gleamed with power, especially the grey marble floor. Officers in immaculate uniform busied themselves with various tasks. Phones rang persistently, fax machines faxed, and 2 young men were escorted past us in handcuffs. My eyes flitted over them in fear, and I wondered if my father was locked up in a jail cell packed with vicious killers, like I'd seen on TV. I followed my grandparents, my shoes tapping noisily across the floor. At the information desk, Nona Rogo spoke to a detective. We're here to see our son-in-law, Jack Richardson, he said, after we talked to Sergeant Wyszynski. I'll take you to him, the gruff-looking detective said in a thick French accent. Follow me, please. He directed us to an interrogation room, motioned us inside, and returned to his duties, leaving the door ajar. The small room was harshly lit with glaring fluorescent lights. 4 rickety chairs and an old metal table were the only objects in the room that was barely 8 by 8 feet wide. The carpets were threadbare and stained with numerous suspicious-looking marks. The pallid blue paint on the pitted concrete walls flaked like badly sunburned skin, and the air smelled like musty mold and stale cigarettes. A tall, thin detective with pale blue eyes entered the room. He had a long, bushy brown mustache that curled up at the ends. His uniform was spotless and intimidating, especially to a girl my age. My name is Sergeant Wyszynski, he said with a smile. He dragged a chair across the floor. Sliding into it, he casually folded his arms over his chest, stretched out his long legs, and crossed them at the ankles. You must be Sarah, he said in a friendly manner. Have a seat. He indicated the chair directly across from him. I glanced at Nona Rocco and Nona Sophia. When my grandfather nodded, I sat down. Lost my spot. Sergeant Wyszynski's eyes sought mine. Sarah, I know this is difficult, but I need to know exactly what happened in your mother's hospital room, what you saw, okay? Okay, but my voice caught in my throat as if a noose were slowly tightening around my neck, strangling the air from my lungs. The detective uncrossed his arms, reached over, and turned on a small tape recorder. Can you please tell me your full name? Sarah Maria Richardson, I stammered. He picked up a pen and notebook. And your mother was in Bamfield General because she was sick. She has had a problem with her heart. What happened yesterday? I closed my eyes. Mom was in a coma. Were your grandparents with you in your mom's hospital room? I nodded and opened my eyes. He smiled. You're doing just fine, Sarah, but I need you to answer out loud, okay? He made a few marks in his book. Who was in the room with you? Just me and my dad, I think. Did your dad do anything? To the machines, I mean. My head snapped up. I flicked a panicked look at my grandparents' direction. They looked miserable, and Nona Sophia's eyes were filled with tears. I said slowly, I don't remember. Where was your dad standing? A sense of dread overwhelmed me, and I looked up at the detective. I don't know. What was he doing by your mom's bed? I never said he was by her bed, I said, frustrated. He pursed his lips. Where was he then? I don't know, I muttered. I don't remember. Onoroko pursed his lips in anger. Sergeant Wyszynski? I'm sorry, Mr. Rossetti, the detective said, waving a hand in the air, but I have a few more questions. He stared at me compassionately. Sarah, can you tell me what your dad did first? Did he turn off the respirator, the machine that helped your mother breathe, or did he turn off the heart monitor? His questions made me furious. I don't know, I snapped, rising to my feet. I told you I don't remember anything. My grandfather was at my side immediately. We're done, he said through clenched teeth. Sarah doesn't remember. She has amnesia. Ask her doctor. Nona Sophia pulled me protectively to one side of the room and murmured soothing words. I heard an odd ringing in my ears, and for a moment I thought I was going to pass out. Sergeant Wyszynski turned off the tape recorder and set down his notebook. I apologize, Mr. Rossetti, he said, but Sarah is an eyewitness, and I had to question her. He walked to the door and paused and glanced over at me. I'm very sorry about your mom, and I'm sorry I had to ask all those questions. I'll get your dad. You can visit for a few minutes. He disappeared into the hall. My grandparents and I waited in complete silence. I had a booming headache, and I massaged my temple, praying that we'd be able to leave soon. The door opened and my father entered, thankfully unshackled. He was slightly disoriented, his clothes were wrinkled, and his unshaven face was haggard. He looked like he hadn't slept in months. I'm so glad to see you, he said, and he hugged me. His grip suffocated me, and I squirmed until he reluctantly released me. Then I flopped onto a chair and scowled at him. When are you getting out of here? I want to go home. Soon, Sarah, he said. They aren't sure if they're laying any charges, so I just have to wait. He threw my grandfather an uneasy look. It could take a few more hours. I wanted to go home with my father, home to the safety of our house on the bay, but I was terrified of going home without my mother. Sarah, I have something important to ask you, my father said seriously. Do you remember anything about what happened in Mom's room? I turned away. No, not really. Are you sure? Jack, we've asked her already, Nona Sophia said. The doctor says she has hysterical amnesia. She doesn't remember a thing. My father sank into a chair. Well, then they won't ask her to testify. He let out a relieved breath. You really think this will go to court? My grandfather asked gravely. And they want to charge you with Rocco, my father warned, shaking his head. He eyed Nona Sophia. I want you to take Sarah home, back to Bamfield. I should be out of here in a couple of hours. They can't hold me much longer without charging me. Can you stay with her until I get back? Of course we'll stay with Sarah, she huffed. Thank you. Both of you. Nona Sophia stared at my father. In a voice filled with emotion, she said, Don't you worry, Jack. We'll look after Sarah till you come home. The door opened and a police officer obstructed the doorway. I love you, Sarah, my father said as he was led away. I'll be home tonight, I promise. Nona Sophia tried unsuccessfully to console me on the ride home, while Nona Rocco drove slowly along the gravel road, swerving around potholes. None of us felt like talking or eating, and the journey home seemed to take forever. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and recalled the first time I had made the trip to Bamfield. My parents and I had been so excited about our new life. I thought of my mother's laugh, her touch, her smell. I remembered seeing the ocean for the first time and being so excited. Now I realized it was only water. My father's face swirled before me. What have you done, Dad? As I stared out the car window at the passing scenery, I wondered why the two people I loved and needed the most had been taken away from me. I was abandoned.